the only way you're going to come back, if it's a sporting analogy without picking any particular sport, but you're going to come back from being a long way behind, it is to sort of almost drop the game plan and start playing what's in front of you and do all those things that are slightly riskier that you wouldn't normally do, but they might just change the dynamics. And so there's a vested interest in this very controlled man. You know, he's very neat, he's very tidy, he's very clean living, he doesn't drink, all of that, but he needs to sort of swing his bat, or whatever your analogy would be, and show better character.
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer don't quite go head to head tonight. They're more back to back in Sky News Leaders event. You can hear it here on Times Radio in full from 7 o'clock tonight. So the format, and let's we have to admit we've criticised many formats. The format tonight is that Sunak and Starmer will both be interviewed before taking questions from the audience. So let's see how that's going to be. We are joined now by Tim Allen, former Downing Street Deputy Director of Communications under Tony Blair, and Guto Harri, former Downing Street Director of Communications under Boris Johnson. Good morning to both of you.
How are you?
Tim Allen, do you have any hopes, fears about this format? Because we want to hear what they have to say, but I think it's fair to say that we don't feel we've really heard that yet.
No, and I think there was a lot of criticism for this sort of 45 seconds, tell us what you're going to do to the country in 45 seconds format of the ITV debate. So hopefully this will be a format designed to bring out some longer arguments and allow people to develop their answers. We'll see. I mean, I think there are two schools of thought from the Keir Starmer perspective about this debate. I'm sure there are some advisors who are thinking, we're 20 points ahead. It's a bit like, if you've got a 20-point lead in the Premier League, do you really want to go risk it all on a head-to-head match? So these debates can be, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people thinking, God, do we really need this? On the other hand, he is the lesser-known candidate, and it is a real opportunity to set out the missions that he's got, the policies that he wants to promote. And I think this format might be a better way of doing that than previous ones. So I suspect that they will both be going into it thinking that this is something that they can get something out.
Guto Harri, how do you think Rishi Sunak is going to play this? He's got more to lose, clearly. Do you think he is going to echo what Grant Shapps seemed to be telling us this morning, which is that basically Keir Starmer is going to win, and it's all now about limiting their majority. And if you vote the wrong way, in inverted commas, there could only be 57 Tory MPs. Do you think, A, is that a good approach? And B, do you expect Rishi Sunak to echo that in any way? Basically Project Fear tonight.
I think my old boss would say that's not the stuff to give the troops. It's literally the hoisting of a white flag, isn't it? But there's an element in which Rishi Sunak is actually the guy with nothing to lose, because the expectations at this stage is that it is all essentially lost. And so that gives him a lot of freedom. If you think the only way you're going to come back, if it's a sporting analogy without picking any particular sport, but you're going to come back from being a long way behind, it is to sort of almost drop the game plan and start playing what's in front of you and do all those things that are slightly riskier that you wouldn't normally do, but they might just change the dynamics. And so there's a vested interest in this very controlled man. He's very neat, he's very tidy, he's very clean living, he doesn't drink, all of that, but he needs to sort of swing his bat, or whatever your analogy would be, and show better character.
So how on earth is he going to do that? Because that's very much out of his comfort zone, Guto, I would suggest. And also, you're saying that he's not going to do you don't think he's going to do that, oh my goodness, we might only have 57 Tory MPs. So what can he do? How can he swing his bat?
Yeah, well, you're right. You've got to do something that is authentic to you. And so when he's tried to play the tough guy before, it's not been credible. But the more he speaks with a sort of sincerity and an honesty, which I think a couple of nights ago came across, he was quite straight. He was saying, look, I'm not perfect. I know some of you are frustrated with me, you're frustrated with my government, but think of the future, think methodically. I think that's quite effective. Two things about tonight. A, Beth Rigby is an extremely tough and very psychologically clever sort of interviewer, I think. She puts people on tender hooks. She's got a lot out of many politicians, and that will be interesting for both men. But the other thing about the format, the way it's actually turned out, is that Rishi Sunak will have the last word tonight. So Keir Starmer will have to make his pitch, and then Rishi will get to respond to that. So that will be interesting as well.
Tim Allen, do you think it's a good idea, in the same way that it might not be a good idea for Grant Shapps to say it's all over? Do you think it's a good idea for Keir Starmer to invoke the ghost of Jeremy Corbyn?
Yes, he was talking about that yesterday during the manifesto, wasn't he? And I think part of his big message is the Labour Party's changed, and therefore we're ready to change the country. And he wants to show that he's moved on from Jeremy Corbyn. And speaking to you from the constituency of Islington North, it's a very big story here, because we have Jeremy Corbyn, who was our MP and is now running as an independent. So he definitely wants to show how he is different from Jeremy Corbyn. But of course, the argument is going to come back, well, you served under Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Do you think anybody really thinks that Keir Starmer was a massive Corbynite and has changed his mind? He was never a massive Corbynite. But I think that people...
Well, yeah, but on paper he was, wasn't he? That's the thing.
He decided that the best thing for the Labour Party and for him and the country was to try and hold that role under Jeremy Corbyn during the Brexit negotiations. I actually think he was right to have made that choice, but nobody thinks that he was a massive Corbynite that has suddenly changed his spots. He never was, and nor does anybody think that he was in charge of sort of Labour's election manifesto last time, because he wasn't.
Okay, so you think it's okay for him to perhaps repeat that, because it did cause a bit of consternation when he said that yesterday.
Yeah, and I'm sure you always get that split screen moment where they sort of run what he said today and then run what he said 2 years ago. And
we did it ourselves, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's a story that writes itself, and it's fine. Yeah. I don't think he'll be too bothered by it, because his overall strategic message is the Labour Party's change and we're different from Jeremy Corbyn. And I think he actually managed to get that across. As for Grant Shapps saying, we're if you help us not lose too badly. I didn't hear exactly what he said, but yeah, I can. It's a high risk strategy. I think there'll be a lot of people though who will be thinking. Probably I'm one of them. They're thinking that if there is to be a Labour government, let it be one with a decent working majority, because it's actually a bit. We've seen what happens when you have governments with relatively small majorities and very powerful backbench opponents of the government, who tend to be of the more extreme kind. That's been the story of the Conservative years. Okay. So under the Blair government, we had such a big majority. The yes backbenchers could have their say, but they didn't really hold. They didn't really hold the power in their hands. And a big majority Labour government is probably likely to be a more moderate one than a small majority Labour government. So I think the argument that Shapps is making may not chime with what a lot of people think.
Well, let's see. Guto, I must ask you finally, really, for your reflections on how Rishi Sunak is being advised in this election campaign. You know the particular points that we're going to dwell on. The getting wet in the rain with no umbrella, the D-Day stuff, some of the stuff in the paper today about, I did have to go without because my mum and dad wouldn't let me have a Sky TV subscription, that kind of stuff. Do you think he's being well advised?
Having been there, like Tim, I'm always hesitant to criticise others because they're extremely difficult jobs there. But clearly,
what would you do differently? What would you do differently?
Well, you wouldn't put him in the rain in the first place. And he personally, having got out in the rain, should have just thought, you know what, I've got about 30 seconds till this is a really bad look. And at that point, he could have just said, there's going to be an election. I've seen the king. I'll tell you more about it later. So he could have turned it around. D-Day the same. That date should have been in the diary, for 8 decades. The Director of Comms in 1944 could have penciled out those 2 days of whichever party they're at. But what I do think is starting to happen now is people are starting to, in all the rows about the numbers, what they're starting to see is if the money is there, Labour would not want to cut benefits and the Tories would in order to cut the taxes of working people. And that divide is just starting to come out through the mist. And I think dare I say, we're starting to get to a debate of substance that really is what should be foremost in your mind in the loneliness of the polling booth.
Interesting. Guto Harri, thank you very much. Guto Harri, former Downing Street Director of Communications under Boris Johnson, and Tim Allen, former Downing Street Deputy Director of Communications under Tony Blair.